Hey everyone, this is DeagleBeagle. So I'm gonna cover the recap of San Diego regionals, even though I wasn't there. But after watching pretty much all the videos of the stream battles and some commentary by other people like Neil VGC, I do think there's a lot of takeaways from that tournament. I think a lot of my predictions were right that we would see basically the best teams be like a lot of good stuff's Pokemon. Like you can have combos, but mostly like have a bunch of good stuff's Pokemon that have good synergy with each other and perhaps have Tailwind, but also, I mean, basically get the speed control, like stop Trick Room, but have Tailwind, for example, or something like that. So we did see a lot of variety in strategies. Rain was a common one. Amoonguss was pretty common. Well, actually, we shouldn't judge just based on the stream. So here's a picture of the top 32 teams, even though that doesn't represent the ones that weren't top 32, but you get a good idea of the best teams, possibly, or the best players' teams, even though there is some luck in the game. So you see a lot of Talonflame, Rain teams. You see a few oddball Pokemon like Metacam, or Metacham, whatever, and Skeledirge isn't used that much, or Breloom, but some people can do pretty well with it. You did see Dreadnought. Dreadnought is one of the top, probably 3 rain Pokemon, obviously, besides Pelipper. Like, Dreadnought, Floatzel, and Palafin are among the best water rain boosted Pokemon in the format. And what other teams did we see? You did see some Dragonite, and Extreme Speed is just an extremely good move. Having 2 priority and outspeeding pretty much all other priority moves is just really useful. And you did see some Grimmsnarl, but I think like Grimmsnarl it did well in some cases, but a lot of times I was feeling like recently people are running so many screens counters that Grimmsnarl doesn't even feel worth it anymore. It used to feel really good, but with everyone running like Flower Trick, Meowscarada, or Focus Energy, Dracometer, or Raging Bull, Brick Break, it's like almost everyone's trying to counter screens, even though not every team uses it. So some other teams we saw were Snow, and although Snow can be really good for raising your defense and the speed of Satitan, I don't feel like Abomasnow is a very good Pokemon in general, because you saw that its offense and defensive typing wasn't very good, and it's slow. It's 4 times weak to fire. It's weak on the special side. It has a lot of weaknesses. The Titan just feels like with one offensive stab move that it just doesn't do that much damage output, but it does have a lot of defense in rain in in snow. But I just still feel like it seems like a jack of all trades Pokemon. Like it doesn't really counter much that well or put a lot of pressure on their team offensively, and it's just not my style. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just not my style. Same with Gothitelle, it's just not my style. It can be really good for trapping them in sometimes, but I feel like it doesn't do that much besides Shadow Tag, and that's why people out of desperation seem to be running like blind hypnosis on it. And I just think that is kind of newbie in the sense that you're running a 60% accurate move, but it's like, what else is Gothitelle gonna do? Not much. So, I mean, if you're gonna use Gothitelle, maybe you should use Hypnosis with it. But it's like, in my opinion, I wouldn't run Gothitelle. It was really good, I think, in one matchup for securing a really good lead advantage, but it's like on average, it's not gonna do that well. There's so many Pokemon that can switch out of it, like Goldango and whatnot, or U-turn Volt Switch is very common as well. Or if they have a lot of offense, simply killing it or doubling up on the alley, whatever. Now, you did see some Garganacl, and I feel like I shouldn't sound like I'm criticizing people or sound arrogant, because a lot of these people, I'm sure I would have done worse than them in the tournament, but I just think a lot of people misplayed, like they just didn't have enough experience on how to beat Garganacl, like, or maybe they did and they just didn't prepare for it, because there's so many other things you have to prepare for. Let me check my notes of what I said. I said 3 things I think about. No, that was about Dondozo. Never mind. Garganacl, basically, what people don't get is the main way that you beat Garganacl is you either kill the 3 allies of Garganacl as fast as you can, or you try to send in really strong Pokemon that can double up on it and kill it. Not just hit it with like one attack here and there. You need to either kill it or ignore it and kill all its allies, and then you're able to double up on it at the end of the game. You need to do probably one of the two, not do in between, like hit it with one move, like Liquidation from Satitan each turn or every other turn, whatever. It's just going to recover and beat you in the long run, especially while Salt Cure is Salt Curing you. It's just going to outpace you in the long run unless you really put high pressure on it, either at the start or at the end game. So that's what I think a lot of people didn't get, and Garganacl therefore did a lot better than it otherwise would have done. But Garganacl is still a really good Pokemon. Salt Cure is one of the best moves in the game, and Garganacl is just really hard to knock out in general. For me, that's why I prefer hyper offense teams, so that I can adjust if I need to. I can double up on that freaking Garganacl and knock it out in the first turn if I want to, or something. Like that much offense I'm talking about. And I like speed control too. But of course, that's easier said than done, especially with they have the defensive terra stalls and all these other things you got to worry about. So if you build a good team around Garganacl, it can prove to be pretty good. Some other things we saw were Mimikyu. Now, I think I liked the Life Orb one, because if you don't use Life Orb, Mimikyu doesn't seem to do enough damage. Usually, like Play Rough or Shadow Claw, it's not going to do that much damage without Life Orb. Not saying you have to use Life Orb with it, but personally, I would probably use Life Orb with it. And you can still curse. See, Bulbapedia is wrong about curse. You know why? Because I saw on the stream you could target whatever Pokemon you want with curse, and that's why it made a good move. I was thinking if it's a random opponent, then it's not good. Like, it's not a consistent counter for Dondozo. Where does it say it can't select its opponent? Ghost type Pokemon are no longer able to choose targets for curse in a double battle. That's BS. Yeah, they are. And will always attempt to inflict the curse on a random opponent. Or maybe that's true, but I think we're in what are we in, Gen 9? Instead of 8? So, I don't know. All I'm saying is that's bullshit. So, they really need to update this on Bulbapedia. I should log into my account and see if I can do it. I don't know if I can still, and and stuff. I remember updating something on Bulbapedia, but I'm not really high ranked on there. I only posted something about Pikachu, the Gigamax Pikachu, once I did well with it because nobody was updating these things. Okay, so anyways, Curse definitely is good, not just versus Dondozo though. Like it was used against, I want to say, Arcanine from a Pokemon in Top Cut. It Mimikyu it's the best selling point of Mimikyu. If you're trying to convince somebody is like you have disguise, so the chance of you getting Trick Room up goes skyrocketing up, especially if you have redirection with it. It's just like almost a guaranteed Trick Room, and that's the biggest benefit of Mimikyu. And it's pretty. It can be pretty fast too outside of Trick Room, or fast enough outside of Trick Room to do well. However, if you're using a hard Trick Room team, Mimikyu is probably not your best bet. But I might. Yeah, I think Mimikyu is in the top tier bracket. I wasn't sure if it should be top tier or not because I didn't use it that much. And I figured it could be though. But its damage output was underwhelming and not my preference. But since you can use Life Orb with it, I really like that idea. Now, let's get into Amoonguss. Sorry. So, it was good at redirection, obviously, in Spore, but with so many good players, obviously not trying to be weak to Amoonguss, or maybe it's partly a coincidence. Amoonguss plus Goldango was very common, and Garganacl and other things. So many things that were immune to Spore and Terra Grass. And see, even with open team sheets, Amoonguss doesn't necessarily do a lot better if people are actually trying to counter Amoonguss in a different way. Like, instead of just relying on the old secrecy of the item, like, safety goggles or something. I mean, they could still use safety goggles on something and still counter it. But I mean, instead of that, like they just have grass Pokemon or a Pokemon that's immune to it by the ability. I mean, just spamming a few Pokemon that are immune to it. And I suppose they could, use Lum or safety goggles too. And Amoonguss is better in OTS in general, though, than non-OTS by far. But even still, my point is, you're still going to run into the immune to Spore issue. And then it's kind of just forced to sit there, Rage Powder, whatever. So, me personally, even with knowing how good Amoonguss can be versus certain teams, that's only versus like the bad team builders that like don't really have enough counters to Amoonguss, or if you can predict like perfectly with it and make it so they never ever are able to switch out to a Pokemon that could get spored. But like you can't, no one can honestly like be a Mind Raider like that. It's just not practical. So I feel like Amoonguss was a little bit overrated because people just thought, oh, Amoonguss gets a lot better with open team sheets and has redirection and stuff. And yeah, it is good for redirection, but that's pretty much all it consistently does is redirection. So I feel like Amoonguss was overrated. And then Pawmot, that Pokemon, I right before San Diego Regionals, I noticed a few weeks before there were a lot of people using Pawmot with Dondozo Tatsugiri to get a revival blessing. I think because they noticed that Dondozo is one of the only Pokemon that's actually worth going out on a limb for to use revival blessing, because people say revival blessing is a busted move, but I don't know if I even agree with that, because I mean, it can be really good to revive certain Pokemon, but typically whatever you revive it's not going to be that good unless it's like a Dondozo that gets its boost up. So besides Dondozo, there's not a lot of other Pokemon that would be really good to use Revival Blessing for, but it's still a decent move. I just think if you're just trying to spam Revival Blessing like more than once, use Rapska. But if you only need it one time, use Palmont. So nothing wrong with Palmont. I do think it was really good on Chupacross's team. But besides the Dondozo Tatsugiri team, I would almost never recommend it. Even though it's still not terrible, it's just double shock only working one time, and it being so fragile, you have to use Sash. I don't know. It just doesn't seem quite worth it otherwise. Now, Goldango, that Pokemon did prove to be really good and useful on a lot of teams because Make It Rain is just an extremely powerful spread move. I do think that the Nasty Plot set is probably the best set overall because they can't just counter you by walling your Make It Rains and forcing you eventually to switch out or keep doing lower and lower damage each turn. So the fact that you have Nasty Plot counteracts that, and you're able to therefore stay in or use your offensive pressure to force them or try to scare them into using Protect while you Nasty Plot. So Goldango definitely proved to be great in the tournament, being immune to Spore too and other things. I don't know if I agree with the Leftovers set. I personally would not usually recommend Leftovers. Now, it is better than Citrus in some cases because you can leave it with greater HP, so it's harder to be finished off than like a Citrus Berry. And if you're somehow miraculously able to keep it in for more turns than you would activate with Citrus, then maybe it's worth it. I just think that I rather use like usually Life Orb with it and invest more in bulk than using like something like Leftovers. That just doesn't. That's there's nothing wrong with it. I guess it's not what I would do personally with it, but it depends on your team and play style. And then rain teams, yeah, I already said it really dominated the scene. It showed it was really good for reducing weaknesses. Like I already had a good defensive team with Pelipper, King Ambit. I don't know why people keep calling it King Gambit because it only has one G, so you have to call it either Kin Gambit or King Ambit. So I call it King Ambit. Anyways, that Pokemon, I personally don't use Terraflying because, well, I might use Terraflying now because it showed it was really good in the tournament, and Terraflying, as I think his name was Aaron Brock or something like that, said he used it because it gets rid of its fighting weakness, it gets rid of its ground weakness, and rain gets rid of its fire weakness. I never quite thought of it like that at first. I mostly was just using like Terra Steel and Rain or Terra Dark before that. I I had found that, yeah, Terra Dark or Terra Steel still leaves it 2 times weak to stuff like fighting, and that is an issue, but it usually wasn't that much of an issue for me, and I did like getting the stab boosted hit with Terra Steel on my rain team, and it just gives it that extra hit, extra power. And I have Protect a Mine. I don't use Assault Vest. I have like black glasses on it, so it hits more powerfully. And well, Assault Vest is a great item. Don't get me wrong. I'm just worried about them getting a free hit on King Ambit, because if you use Terra Flying, yes, you may be able to counter their fighting Pokemon better, but what about their ally? It's like, do you really, I don't know, do you really want to lose you're steel typing, then you get hit harder by fairy moves, dragon moves, make it rain. It's like, for me, I think that Terra Flying is really good, but also like Terra Steel or Dark is really good. Also, I would say Terra Flying is probably better than Terra Fairy overall, but it depends. And then Salamence having Life Orb Dracometer on Jody's team showed to be pretty good, and he had Hurricane with it and Rain, so that's a pretty good idea. I actually was using Hurricane with Dragonite and White Herb multi-scale, so you could use a Dracometer and then another Dracometer at full power, and if, let's say, they do intimidate you to get rid of the White Herb, well, you use extreme speed anyways. It's like partially a physical attacker. So it's like even Gavin Michaels, he used Sharp Beak Hurricane. So you did see a lot of Hurricane on rain teams. I expect Pokemon like Iron Jugulus to be used with Hurricane instead of these Pokemon now, because it gets stab Hurricane and could be pretty good on a rain team. And then, but that's for Series 2. Dondozo also did pretty well. A little bit better than I thought, I gotta be honest. But that's mostly because people just didn't know how to counter Dondozo. They still didn't know how to counter it, or they knew how to counter it, but they just either got out predicted or they just didn't try to counter it with their team. I don't know why they didn't try to counter it, because it's obviously one of the most common, like, imminent combos. Like, besides Mouse 8-bit, I mean, it's more common than even Mouse 8-bit. It's probably the most common, well-known combo that everyone keeps talking about, but for some reason, like, nobody prepared for it. Let me see. I'm gonna pull up my guide of how to counter them. I think no, it's not this one. It was, no, Series 1, I think. Yeah, I even made this video of it before regionals. Let's see what counters Dondozo. So, Clear Smog would definitely counter the flying one. What I don't get is why people just led or early in the game switched in their Pokemon that they needed to conserve to beat Dondozo. That's even how Chuppa won, I think, his second match versus the regionals winner, is that he switched in the Tauros way early, and therefore he couldn't get off as many Intimidates on the Dondozo as he would otherwise. So it's like, in my opinion, you should wait until you see the combo Dondozo plus the Tatsugiri. Don't let them play the mind games with you where they're trying to bluff. Oh, I'm trying to bluff that I'm switching in Tatsugiri. Like, they can do that for some of your attacking moves and stuff and try to get a free hit with their Pokemon that's on the other side of Dondozo. But I mean, I'm talking about, like, at least save your counters for Dondozo when it finally comes in, at least, so you can actually beat it. Like, if you, for example, save your Terra and you can save it like Terra Water or whatever you have with Amoonguss, even though, by the way, I think I normally prefer Terra Rock with Amoonguss, because not only does it get the sand boost, but mostly because it resists all the things that's trying to kill it. Like flying is very common to kill it, like Brave Bird or Terra Flying or something. So I prefer Rock, I think, personally, but Water's good too. Rock also resists fire. Fire and flying are probably the two most common types of attacks that kill it otherwise. So Haze is another one. We saw Palafin with Haze. There's Gengar with Haze, etc. Spore can shut it down, even though you did see Res Chesto Berry, which I think is very underrated. I had Res Chesto or Res Lum on a lot of my Dondozo sets. I don't think Sleep Talk is quite worth it with leftovers. I think you only need to like rest one time usually, and then keep attacking again. Now, some other Dondozo counters would be Perish Song, cause a status move to it, especially if they don't have rest, like Will-O-Wisp or something, poison them. But the good ones were like Chuppa with Chesto Resto one, they call it. So I think that makes the difference between his team and other teams is he's a good team builder. He's been playing a long time. Other people, they have a lot of experience with Dondozo Tatsugiri, but they still don't have the perfect team for it. And I think Chuppa had like the perfect team for it with Palmot and whatnot. It's just Dondozo can't beat everything. With Intimidate and Terra Flying, or whatever Terra you use. That's the problem with Dondozo, is it's easily manipulated around because you only have one attacking Pokemon out on the field, and it relies a lot on its defensive Terra, and he pretty much had to use Terra Flying for the Meowscarada, but then it's weak to Baxcalibur. So it's like, it's hard to beat everything. So that's the problem with it. And he used the speed raising one. I guess there isn't anything that wrong with it, but I personally would recommend the attack one because otherwise Intimidate's just going to shut you down more if you don't use the order up with the attack raising one. If you're going to use order up at all, I recommend the orange curly one because attack to me is way more important than speed. Speed is good to outspeed Meowscarada, but like you need attack like to kill stuff. It's like people don't understand that that they can just cycle Intimidates on you, and in fact that's why I used to use Oblivious Dondozo in the early season because it was, in my opinion, better than Unaware. But later Unaware I'd say overall is better, but with all the cycling of Intimidate, that just really screws up Dondozo. People would also curse it, other things. So lots of different ways to beat it, but the way you mostly beat it is being smart and saving your counter in the back for waiting until they set up the combo and then try to counter it. Not like just letting your counters die to it, like die to it or other things, like conserve it. Now let's go back to this. Let's actually review the top teams again from regionals and how they probably operated. So some teams, I'm not going to say they didn't have great synergy, but they might not have had as much defensive synergy, like something like Pelipper with King Ambit and whatnot. It might have been a lot of good Pokemon, I'm not going to say thrown together, but on the same team, and it might have decent options to switch out and stuff, but it's just a different kind of team that's not a really defensively synergized team, more of like an offensive team with obscure Pokemon like Salazzle. Now I think our Bolivia wasn't used that much, but it's one of the most underrated Pokemon, especially since you can use it like Ferrothorn and just spam Leech Seed and keep it alive for a long time in the back. And what else should we go over? I still don't know why, I don't know exactly how Corviknight operates and what its strengths and weaknesses are, but I personally have never had a problem with it because it seems like Mirror armor isn't that great of an ability unless I'm missing something. I would love to ask. I need to ask Alberto actually why he used Corviknight. So I can't really talk smack about it. And he did do really well at the regional, so props to him. I just don't know what the Corviknight does. And that's on me. That's not on him. That's I can't judge him really for that at all because I don't know why he used it. I just feel like he used it because it's a bulkier Pokemon that is hard to kill. You get up tailwinds with it. It may not be priority, but like it being hard to kill in a sense, unless you have a special move that super affects it. A lot of physical moves it can wall, but it doesn't have a ton of defense, so you can flare blitz it and whatnot. Okay, let's go on to a few other teams, and then we'll go into actually the open team sheets. I have a whole list of that. That's more the boring stuff. So I'll only briefly go over it to point out the interesting parts. Now, we didn't see a lot of mouse ape. We saw a few of them, but I think I know why, because I had posted a comment right before regionals that said that I would prefer personally, after using mouse ape a lot testing out, to not use mouse ape, because for mouse ape to do well you have to basically really dedicate yourself to the combo, but then you can't just kind of pick it outside of that combo, and then you're kind of forced to pick those other four Pokemon. If you can't, like, let's say they have Follow Me, then probably mouse ape is really going to do not very well at all, because they can't just spam beat up. But then if that's the case, then you're kind of used to you have to use your other four Pokemon most likely, and they already know what four Pokemon you're gonna probably use, and if you use, like, for example, ape outside of the combo, it's not gonna do nearly as well. So it's just like, I personally wouldn't use mouse ape, but it still did. There's still some decent amount of mouse ape in Top Cut, so it's not bad. It's just not, in my opinion, great. And what else should we talk about? Did see a little bit of other Pokemon variety used. So let's go to the team sheets. Oh, that's funny. They have it in many different languages. Okay, Terra Grass. I don't know what. Oh, it's probably versus Spore. Me personally, instead of using Thunder Wave, I might use Misty Train because I hate Among Us. But Thunder Wave could be really good for the speed control, and yeah, he used Terra Grass to counter probably not only Rage Powder, but the Spore. And then Scarf. Okay, that's why he has Stomping Tantrum on it, because he probably didn't want to get locked into an Earthquake, and that's usually not that great, because you have to hit your ally, and they could have a bunch of immunities. And then Standard, Terra could be anything. Torch Song. Weakness, I think Weakness Policy is a really good item with Goldango, but in the tournament, there weren't a lot of people trying to super affect Goldango even when it wasn't Weakness Policy. They would either be able to one-shot it outright, but usually more commonly they would just keep chipping it at it. So Weakness Policy in open team sheets is probably not as good as like on Showdown Ladder, but it's still a pretty good item. Now, Soak, I suppose, would be used for Palmot, for the double shock or something like that. I'm not sure about Electric. It might be good for one double shock, but you can only use it one time. So, I don't know about that. And then, yeah, so, I might want to just use Terra Fighting if it were me, personally, but typically when you use close combat with Palma, you don't need the extra power. So I could, oops, what did I do? No, what did it, oh, oh no. Hope I didn't delete something. Okay, so Natural Cure is probably the best ability for it too, because like it's already electric type and resists electric, so you don't really need Volt Absorb usually with it. And he did use Dragon Terra. That is the biggest bonus of Dragon Terra is you have a more powerful order up, but I don't know. It has its pros and cons. Like Terra Grass is immune to Spore. So he uses Rest though, so it makes a lot of sense with the Terra Dragon one. And it still resists Meowscarada, but this one I feel like is more weak to Amoonguss because they can clear Smogu. So I wouldn't use this one personally. I would probably use the either Terra Steel one or the Terra Grass one, because you can't rely offensively on the flying to kill the Amoonguss when it can just use like Terra Water or Terra Rock or whatever. And it's just, to me, the main priority to me would be keeping its stats. That'd be probably the number one priority. And then not letting status beat you. He did have Chesta for that, but he's vulnerable to clear Smog here with this Dondozo. So he probably really made sure he killed the Amoonguss somehow. That's probably why he had Arcanine and stuff, even though it's usually not a, I wouldn't say it's a top tier Pokemon, but on this specific team it makes sense considering he's using Dragon Dondozo, where Amoonguss is more of a threat to it if it has Clear Smog, which almost all do. And standard Goldingo. Okay, now let's get into Emilio Forbes. He used both Covert Cloak and Terra Ghost. That's one thing I don't think I agree with, unless he can explain himself. Maybe it is for a good reason. Like, I'm thinking he did this because if the item either got knocked off or he wanted to beat extreme speed, maybe, to that outsped Brave Bird. I don't know. But Terra Ghost is just good for getting up a Tailwind. Me personally, I don't know if you absolutely need to stop being fake outed. You do if you lead it a lot, but I found that once I stopped leading with Talonflame and used it in the back, it got way better. That's what a lot of people don't get. Is I'm not talking down at all on Emilio Forbes. He used it fine, but me personally, I would prefer like Life Orb with it, a lot of power. I would prefer to not use Will-O-Wisp and risk missing it. I would probably just use Tailwind, Brave Bird, either Flare Blitz or Overheat, and the fourth move, I suppose you don't need Protect. If you have Covert Cloak and Terra Ghost, you don't need Protect. But on the ones that don't have that stuff, you probably want Protect. So I have Protect on mine. And then, what else? A lot of standard stuff. Meowscarada. Oh, he actually uses Life Orb. That's weird, because most people use Sash, and then it's just like, it's almost guaranteed to get off 2 hits with Sash with its speed. It's and stuff. So Meowscarada is just a really good Pokemon. And Glamora with the toxic spikes from its ability is really good. Maybe I'm not surprised that he doesn't use Energy Ball. You don't have to, especially if you use Terra Water. I just am wondering why he uses Terra Water. I don't know. I would want to investigate that. So yeah, I need to actually find out why he uses Terra Water Terra Water, Glamora, Emilio Forbes, and let's look at some other things. Oh, I need to write down Terra Ghost, Covert Cloak, Talon Flame by Emilio, and scrolling down, I should test out too the I should test out. So see, these are my tiers. These are like my tier lists. What was that thing? Oh, Life Orb, um, Meowscarada. Okay. See, these are the things I needed to test more. I didn't attend regionals on purpose because I felt like I wasn't quite ready because I was testing all these random crappy Pokemon to put them into tiers and stuff that I really didn't have enough experience with one particular team, and my best teams were getting countered a lot more all of a sudden by things. I used to use screens with like a defensive rain team, and that wasn't working in other teams too, like a hyper offense team, and I didn't quite get it uh, geared up for regionals, and hard trick room wasn't as consistent as I was wanting, so I wasn't having any team I was really comfortable with, so I didn't really attend. And then I didn't have a switch either, so I wanted to make sure I was confident with using the switch, so maybe next time. um Wait, why is it why is it Emma? Wait, why are they giving people nicknames, or did they name themselves that? I think they call themselves that. Okay. A jetpack is good, actually, for a regenerator. That's a good idea. Now, when I see good ideas, I write them down. Sorry. So, Ghost, King Ambit. That's really good for countering fighting, but it doesn't help versus ground or fire. Safety goggles, yeah, good versus Amoonguss. Choice scarf, thunder. So that's really relying on rain. And Terragrass for the Amoonguss, even though you could alternatively run a flying Terra Flying Hurricane and try to kill it easier, even though it could use a defensive Terra. Now, Palafin proved to be really good in the tournament with Choice Band or other items. Especially, I think it's better in open team sheets because you can be more confident if you should flip turn or not, because you know if they have Protect or not. But on Showdown ladder where it's not open team sheets, it's like you oftentimes you just see them switch out now and not even use flip turn because it's like they don't want to risk Protect. Okay. Now, scrolling down, see, people are using Inner Focus, Dragonite early in the season, but when Intimidate became less common, or the fact that they're using Defiant with it, a Defiant ally with it, most people just went with Multiscale. Multiscale is just an amazing ability, so I really like it. Now, you did see a lot of Terra Flying Talonflames because it boosts the Brave Bird. I personally would use Terra Flying and not worry so much about the fake out. Because I'm using Talonflame in the back too, where I probably won't get fake outed. And he used Wide Lens, so you would hit his Will-O-Wisp. That's a good idea if you're using it like that. And what else? Mirror Herb proved to be really good with Tauros. The Aqua version 2. Terra Dark's a good defensive typing with Gothitelle. Blind Hypnosis, Citrus Berry, yeah. Okay, he doesn't even use an attacking move with it, because like the most you would do with it is probably Psychic. Now, Leaf Storm is a pretty underrated move with Amoonguss because it does hit somewhat hard. And it's like, I don't remember getting leaf storm in previous generations. I think that's a new kind of thing. That's what I was joking about with a friend. Like, dang, I should try that to hit something hard that won't expect it. And oh, it's another Pelipper grass, huh? This team, similar stuff. Outrage, I feel like, is a pretty good move, especially on the choice band set where it's like, what else are you gonna really use? It's like it's just a hard hitting move in general, and it does well even if they use redirection. It's gonna hit their redirection Pokemon really hard. And Terra Water is good on Volcarona. Like any defensive Terra is good on Volcarona, even though people normally use Grass to boost the Giga Drain. So I don't know about these It seems semi-random with water and whatnot, even though there's probably a good reason. So anything interesting? Not really, though. Sableye can be pretty good with Encore Disable. So Wolfie Glick, he actually used Citrus Berry with Tatsugiri. I don't personally know why he used Citrus. Maybe it is for a good reason. I'm sure it's not for a bad reason, but I think if you're trying to counter the mirror with it, you either want Sash or Scarf. So maybe he wanted to use it versus other things, like doing that whole bluff where he's going to switch in Dondozo on the other side and keep it alive with Citrus Berry in case he has to use it as like an attacker before the combo. I don't know though. And let's see. I think the smartest thing that Wolfie did for his team building was give Annihilate Terra Grass, because he and other people know you can use like Amoonguss and use Rage Powder, and then it doesn't even one-shot the Amoonguss, and then it's like not worth it with the final Gambit. But with Terra Grass, you can alternatively hit the other Pokemon if you really need to knock it out. Yes, you do use a Terra, but going past Rage Powder is really useful, and I didn't think of that. That's a really good idea. In fact, I need to write that down. Terra Grass, Annihilate. That's the best. One of the best ideas I've seen in the tournament that's like original. So, props to Wolfie there. See, no, never mind. Terra Blast Fire. I was gonna say if it was Fairy, you might as well use Moonblast usually. Standard. Okay. Let's look for anything unique. These are pretty standard moves. Now, Chilling Water was pretty interesting on the Tauros, I have to say. I imagine he used it versus specifically like Dondozo and a few other things that really needed to attack. So I'm thinking, why would you use Chilling Water with it? It's special. And it's not that powerful. I think mostly just for really forcing Pokemon that are physical to either switch out or do not as much damage. So I guess I could see that. It's just I don't know if I would do that personally, but maybe it's fine. And then Fairy Pelipper. I don't know. See, I need to test out random defensive Terras that don't resist much of what that Pokemon is weak to. Like, Terra Fairy would be good for walling like a Dracometer or whatever. Maybe that's what he was trying to do with it. I'm not sure. But I don't even see a Terra Blast, so he's not trying to hit things with a Fairy move. He's trying to... I don't know. I gotta ask him. Or somebody's gotta ask him. Okay, Safety Goggles, good versus Amoonguss. But not that powerful, though. This one didn't have clear smog versus. Okay, he doesn't need clear smog probably because he already knows a lot of them will run sub or steel, terra steel anyway. So I could see that's why some Amunguses are dropping clear smog for more reliable counters because the only people that are gonna let their Dondozo get clear smog usually are bad at it. Even though Chepa Cross got second with it, but I think he tries to get rid of the Mungus before he switches in Dondozo. But still, me personally, I would probably prefer to counter like the average person that doesn't run a super consistent Dondozo counter, because that's like one of the most common ways people try to counter it. See, that's the thing is even though Dondozo is used so much, for some reason people just don't know how to counter it or don't try to counter it. I don't get it. It's like I'd be thinking of every possible way I could to counter that thing if I entered the tournament. Now, let's look at some stuff. Salazzle, oh, he didn't copy the jetpack set from Jamie Boy. At least he uses Endeavor with Sash. That's pretty cool. And let's see a few more ones. See a lot of repetition here with Leaf Storm. People want that damage output with the Mungus. They don't want it to just sit there. Okay. Standard. I already talked about his team. Specs is alright, I guess. Like after overheat, it's still pretty powerful. But I also I would like the idea instead, possibly, to use like overheat and then volt switch right after to later get your special attack back. Instead of kind of overheating and then forced to have a weaker attack after that and eventually being like forced to switch out. I mean, volt switch at least would do some damage right after the overheat. But specs is fine for countering the basically lower offense problem with overheat on the second turn. Now, he used Terra Poison type to counter the toxic spikes and other reasons, I think. Loaded Dice kept showing how good it was on Baxcalibur. It's a really good Pokemon. Safety Goggles. Crash. Yeah, some people didn't even run Raging Bull because Raging Bull is mostly to prevent recoil and for screens. But sometimes you want more damage output. So he uses Wave Crash. Focus Blast is kind of funny. He probably uses it to counter stuff like King Ammon and get the coverage, but to me, I don't know if I would risk the accuracy though. Like a 70 accurate move is just really kind of low. So I don't know about that one, but other stuff I think he did really well with. You did see some Protect, Tauros, and I think this is another one with Safety Goggles. Wait, oh yeah, the regional winner hat. This is the regional winners team. He had Safety Goggles, Tauros. Alright. So that's a good way to counter a Mungus. And this person, I think, had a way to counter Dondozo with the Focus Energy set. Someone else used Salazzle? And then Stephen Mott for Masters used Terra Blast Water. See, Terra Blast Water Scissor I think is kind of underrated because at first when I was using Scissor, I'm like, well, freaking Arcanine beats it and Intimidate and fire Pokemon beat it, even in rain, because I was using like Terra Steel. But if you use Terra Water, I think that's probably the best way to use it on a rain team because. Oh, does he even use it on a rain team? No, he doesn't. But even on a non-rain team, you get rid of that 4 times weakness, and you can actually hit back against the fire Pokemon with Terra Blast Water. So I really like that idea. Mouse 8. Dreadnought proved to be really good. Oh, Terra Blast Grass. He must use that for coverage. I'm going to write that one down because I normally haven't used that with Dreadnought yet. I've been messing around with it with Shell Smash, Sash, or whatever, and I haven't really used Life Orb with it either that much. So I think Life Orb is really good offensively. And I was using Terra Water with it, but if you have Life Orb, maybe you don't need Terra Water. Steel, huh? Oh, he uses Bullet Punch. Okay, that makes sense. And then he gets rid of the Psychic weakness, etc. Not bad at all. Cedric Bernier. Hope I'm pronouncing it right. Another Dracometer Life Orb Hurricane Vents. That looks similar to that other team that Jody had. I wonder if they talked about it with each other. Okay, anyways, scrolling down, Colin. Life Orb, Swords Dance. I don't personally recommend this type of Excalibur because because I feel like the loaded dice set just does so much damage output with Icicle Spear. It is really good at countering sashes, and I feel like use Excalibur to its niche. And a sword stance, you can't always set up something like a sword stance, or even if you do, it's like they might just wall Ice Shard still, or not be weak to it, and then you're slower than them with your Glaive Rush still. So I prefer personally Dragon Dance over Sword Stance. And this Volcarona is pretty decent as a support set. Flame Body plus Rocky Helmet is really good. There's like Mouse Hold and whatnot. And uses Substitute. I used a set like this, but I used Calm Mind. And I felt like it was really good, and I used Leftovers over Throw Spray. But I suppose this is fine too. Terra Grass. I don't know why it's Terra Grass. I suppose to get rid of the ground weakness and whatnot. But you're already immune to Spore. Okay, let's see if there's Bright Powder Talonflame. Come on, man. That's just trying to get hacks. And then, is there anything else unique that we can look for? Because we already seen almost all the unique stuff. Mimikyu, Ghost. No, pretty dang standard. Except Terra Blast Fire is kind of interesting. It's like there's so many different ways to use the defensive Terras and use them offensively as well. It's like there's almost unlimited ways of those. So it's like it's almost feels like you could use almost anything and it would be good because people can't prepare for all these Terra Fire, Terra Electric, Terra Water, Excalibur, or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of a weird game we have. But at least you see it with open team sheets. This one had Trick Room. For some reason, people thought it wasn't legal to use Imprison Trick Room, but like obviously it is because you can get it in game. So Dazzling Gleam with Fairy is good for it's just good because with the fairy type, you get rid of your dark weakness, and you can hit them back hard with Dazzling Gleam Stab from that Terra. And flying could be pretty good with safety goggles. Meta Cam or Cham is pretty offensive, and it's one of the only Pokemon that gets Fake Out. So I could see it doing pretty well, but I want to use High Jump Kick with it. I think I should test it out again. What did I say about it? Well, first let me... What item did he use? Sash? Sash Metacam with Close Combat. I think I tested out with Axe Kick. Yeah, see, I for some reason was just thinking to use Axe Kick because that's like its signature move, kind of, and yeah, it just wasn't that great with Axe Kicks. But with Close Combat, it's probably better, so you don't take the recoil versus Protect. I think that was my main issue with Metacam. And its speed isn't super high, but it's good enough to outspeed a lot of things. Now, let's look at something else. Wait, that looks like a very similar team to Emilio's team, except slightly different. Might be a coincidence, but the whole idea of Ghost with Cover Cloak, I still gotta figure out. A lot of people really are trying to counter Amoonguss with or at least not be weak to Amoonguss, and so they're using either Terra Grass or Safety Goggles a lot of times. For me, I just risked being weak to like the Amoonguss personally, but I could see Terra Grass being really good to hit through it, to hit the ally. So I definitely need to test that out. Terra Grass, Tauros. Terra Grass, it gets better with Pokemon that gets countered by Amoonguss otherwise, so you can hit through it. Or other Rage Powder Pokemon like Volcarona. Alright. Standard. I mean, even though it's standard, the moves can change a little bit. Like, this one has... What is it? Well, Protect over Clear Smog. Now, this is the type of Talonflame I would use, personally. Or you can use Overheat with Flare Blitz. But then if you use Overheat over Flare Blitz, you probably can't use Jolly, because then you don't have enough power to one-shot something, and Overheat can miss. So Flare Blitz is probably the better choice, even though you take recoil, and it has more power and probably, or about the same. To each their own. Now, I don't prefer using Rotom Wash because you can miss stuff like Will-O-Wisp, Hydro Pump. I've just had a lot of bad luck with it. But if you are going to use it, probably use Citrus and just risk it, even though you could use something like Zoom Lens. But the problem with Zoom Lens is it's still faster than a lot of these Pokemon and can still miss its Will-O-Wisp or Hydro Pump. So if it had much slower speed, I'd recommend Zoom Lens. But since you can't make it a lot slower, then probably don't use Zoom Lens. I don't know. Zoom Lens is still a good item. Okay, so this is Arboliva, however you pronounce it. Life Orb, I'm not sure about though. I normally would recommend Leftovers, and I'm not sure about Earth Power, maybe, for coverage. I think I used Hyper Voice, but I'm not saying you have to. It doesn't really super affect anything. Okay, scrolling down. I'll have to test out Covert Cloak more. But to me, like, it stopping flinches, I guess the flinch, not, it might be worth it if you're not just trying to stop the flinch from fake out, but also from like rock slide or whatever when you're trying to set up trick room or iron head flinching you or dark pulse or whatever. So yeah, I could see it more with a trick roomer or a tailwind setter maybe. Now, James Beck. See, this is, yeah, the Talonflame I like to use. Nothing that out of the ordinary. This one. Fairy is a common good defensive typing, especially if you use Terra Blast with it. If you don't use Terra Blast with it, though, I don't know about Fairy. It's still good a little bit defensively, but I think Terra Blast might be good with it, and just get rid of Slack Off and use the Terra Blast with it for the coverage, and then use like Talonflame and back, and use all those the offense from Torch Song against the enemy. But he does have Citrus, so it makes it maybe more ideal for using Slack Off. Now, Assault Vest Azumarill was used a lot, but I personally like using a Perish Song one and back, because I've won so many games, especially when screens were a lot better. I've won so many games by just stalling with Perish Song. Like, I can't tell you how many games I've won with that. That's why I was going to use a team like that with Rain with Azumarill and screens, but with everyone countering screens, I had to rethink everything. Now, this is the type of Dragonite I might like to use with this policy. Dragon Dance, Extreme Speed, except I don't agree with the Fire Punch and Tailwind. Maybe if you're trying to get certain types of coverage, but like me personally, I would probably use like Low Kick, because that'll hit King Gambit and other things that think better. The most common resistances for Dragonite are like King Gambit and other things that resist like normal. So Dragon Claw's decent with it. Other moves are decent with it. I prefer Ice Spinner on almost all the Dragonite sets, because if they have Psychic Terrain, then it really shuts down your extreme speed. So I personally would use like Ice Spinner over Tailwind, and then use like Low Kick, or I guess you could keep Fire Punch maybe, but I would probably use Low Kick over that. The thing I don't get is why you would use both Tailwind and Dragon Dance. Like the average, like, I mean, for you to use both Tailwind and Dragon Dance, that would be pretty rare. And I suppose you could use one or the other depending on which one's better, but like, they're similar moves and they're both setup moves. I would probably not use both together. That's just my opinion, but maybe it worked out well for him. I mean, he did get top cut. Rocky Helmet Mousehold, huh? Okay, that must be when they fake out. Did he use Annihilate on this team? No? Huh. So, okay, Super Fang Encore. He probably just used it for good redirection in general. And Follow Me is better than Rage Powder, because grass types can't go through it. Okay, Joshua Lorcy, he was supposed to retire, but he came back out of retirement, I guess, to battle in this tournament. And he did quite well. Friend Guard is a really good ability. Wait, that looks very similar to the other one. He did use Safety Goggles. I prefer Safety Goggles with Mousehold. It's like, if you're using Mousehold Ape anyways, because it's like, you got to keep it consistent. And you being able to work versus Rage Powder teams makes the team good. But if you didn't have Safety Goggles, there would be so much Rage Powder that it would just make you almost never able to pick the combo, and then it wouldn't even be worth picking, in my opinion. So I feel like if you're using Mousehold Ape, it should almost always be using Safety Goggles on the Mousehold. Just my opinion. And if you can't use Terra Grass either because you need Terra Ghost sometimes versus the Fake Out. In fact, I don't know why this is fairy. I mean, I would prefer. I gotta ask him that. Uh, Terra. Actually, I need to ask him that. Terra Fairy Mousehold. Lorcy. Joshua Lorcy. He's a cop by day and a Pokemon player by night. Alright, let's see. A few more people to go, and we're almost done with this whole thing. I was just going to show a few players, but I figured go through all of this stuff. Rest Talk is alright. Droopy, I think that raises defense. In my opinion, I would rather raise attack or speed than defense because it already has a lot of defense. Maybe if it raised special defense because that has lower special defense, but it raises defense, so meh. Okay, Babiri, I could kind of see that. But if you're using Babiri, you might not even need Detect on it. Depends. Maybe for neutral hits. Okay. Scott Iwafuchi, something like that. He used all of this. Pretty dang standard stuff. Not much to see there. So, those are all of the top 32 teams that were given. I think they were from Billa. I think I got it from Billa. If you look up top 32 San Diego team sheets, I think I looked that up, and I saw Billa. Something like that. San Diego team sheet. I don't know. I just remember seeing top 32 San Diego, and I found Billa's sheet. Yeah, this one is where I got this from. And I think that's pretty much mostly it to talk about. I'll have to go over my tier list later, but I feel like this regional really showed what was good and what wasn't, but to the experienced players, I don't think they really learned that much from it. They already kind of knew one way or the other. I think it's more unexperienced players that for some reason they just didn't try to counter Dondoso and a few other things, and that's why they did pretty well. But most of the good teams were just ones that had good players. They were just good players, not so much the team, but good players. But then the team also, had good synergy and whatnot. So thanks for watching.